morning. This is my lesson plan on telling and showing time to 5-minute intervals. It is a lesson for math for 2nd grade. In this lesson, the students will learn how to tell and show time to 5-minute intervals using AM and PM. It meets the Kansas State Common Core Standard 2MD7, tell and write time from analog and digital clocks to the nearest 5 minutes using AM and PM. It also meets the NETS standards. Students demonstrate a sound understanding of technology, concepts, systems, and operations. Students select and use applications effectively and productively. In this lesson, the student will manipulate a student clock to show time to 5-minute intervals with 90% accuracy. The student will demonstrate telling time to 5-minute intervals using educationcity.com, the game's TikTok version 2 and 3, and analog and digital clocks with 90% accuracy. The teacher will need to create an Active Inspire lesson, gather whiteboard markers, erasers, 1 per student, student clocks, 1 per student, and bookmark the page educationcity.com. Education City is a website that you have to purchase. Active participation by students: draw and label an analog clock, manipulate a student clock to show a given time, and use educationcity.com games to show the time on an analog clock when given a digital time and when given the time using words. For special learners, with my student that needs SPED services in math, I would have the clock already drawn for him or her to label. I would also have him or her use my large geared clock while the other students are using the small clocks. I would pre-teach the lesson to my gifted student. I would allow him or her to manipulate the Mimeo while I monitored the students. In order to assess my students, I would use observation throughout the clock labeling. I would ask for 90% accuracy while the students are using the individual clocks to show time. I would also ask for 90% accuracy on both Education City games. This lesson could easily be adapted to meet the 3rd grade math standard for telling time to the nearest minute by simply changing the Active Inspire lesson to meet that specific need. This is a lesson that I've created in Active Inspire that I would use with my students. It is used on the Mimeo, so I'm able to use a stylus to manipulate it on the board. For this presentation, I had to take a snapshot of the video, or of the presentation, and insert it into my Google video. Our lesson is going to be telling time to the nearest 5 minutes. The first thing I would have my students do is to give me a reminder of what AM and PM means. And of course, AM means it's before lunch and PM means after lunch. This would be me writing this on the board while the students are talking to me. Then we would begin labeling our clocks. I would have my students draw a large circle on their individual whiteboard. And then we would put 4 slash marks to let them know that 12 is at the top, 6 is at the bottom, 3 is to the right, and 9 is to the left. Before we go on to the next part of the lesson, because we will be talking about counting by 5s, I would play the following YouTube video.
Dance. Let's see those hands.
And of course you can see it has the kids getting up and really moving around throughout this.
70.
After we listen to the YouTube video, I would have my students put 4 slash marks between, or first we would go through and put 2 large slash marks between the 2 and 3 and label the 1 and 2, and so on and so forth around the clock. And then we would go in and put 4 slash marks between the 12 and the 1, and then between the 1 and the 2, and so forth. And then we would go back and I would show them to count by 5s around the outside edge of the clock. Then I would tell them, or remind them, that the inside numbers tell time to the hour and the outside numbers tell time to the minute. I would also remind them that the small hand tells the hour and the long hand tells the minutes. Then I would show the following clock on the board. I would ask them what time it is, and I would also add, is it in the morning? Or I would say it's in the morning, and they would have to tell me AM or PM. And then I'd change to the next clock, and I would ask them what time it was once again, and then I would say it's in after lunch, and so they would have to tell me it's PM. And I would continue doing this with several other clocks on the board. Then I would write the digital times up on the board, and you'll see the notes out to the side that says after lunch, before lunch, and after lunch again, just to help them get in the habit of saying 3:10 p.m., 6:50 a.m., 12:35 p.m. They would also have individual student clocks that they would each be using to show those times, and as they finish, I would just go check the clock and see how they've done on it. Once we finished our lesson on the board, I would ask my students, we would use center time, math centers, and they would go to educationcity.com. As I said, this is a paid site, and so therefore your school has to pay for the login information. And I don't know exactly how much this is a year, but I know that our school uses it K through 2nd grade, and that's a yearly subscription for us. On the Education City, they have 2 different clock games that they would do. I would ask for them to have 90% accuracy on both of those games as their assessment. Throughout this lesson, students have learned how to label an analog clock, tell time to the nearest 5 minutes, and how to show time to the nearest 5 minutes using a personal whiteboard, student clock, and educationcity.com. My references I used throughout this lesson, the Counting by 5 song from YouTube, and TikTok version 2 from Education City, and TikTok version 3. Thank you for listening to my presentation.